and I'm getting the go flag, so I'm going to go.
All
So,
right.
good evening, everyone. We really appreciate you being here with us. I'm Lolita Tony, and I am a past WPCTN board chair and a longtime member. And I am beyond excited about tonight's program and to have the opportunity to have these two incredible legends and history makers with us. So before we get started with that, a little bit about WPCTN. If you're not a member, please join. Our goal is to achieve parity for women by influencing policy through education and mobilization of statewide networks. And so we do a number of programs like this. In fact, tomorrow we have a lunch and learn program with council member at large, Blake Allen, and with a council woman from one of our sister countries, Germany. And that one is free. Tomorrow is to talk about government and council women. So if you're available, please join that program. But that's what we do here. So let's get it kicked off. Tonight, we have the privilege of having Joan Cronan with us, who is the University of Tennessee Athletics Director Emerita. And so we are very pleased to have Joan.
Thank you.
You're in Knoxville, right, Joan?
I'm right downtown Knoxville.
Well, we're glad.
Or West Knoxville, I guess.
Well, we're very, very happy to have you. And then we have our own hometown girl here. We have Candice Lee, who has just recently been named Vice Chancellor for Athletics and University Affairs and Athletic Director for Vanderbilt University. And this is remarkable. She is the first woman to hold that seat and the first African-American woman to hold that seat. And so we're very excited to have both of these incredible women. I have the distinction of being Leadership Nashville classmates with Candice. So it is really exciting to see her in this role. And we also have with us, we have some Vanderbilt alums as well. We have Miss Kathy Bender, who is also a legend in her own right. She was the first African-American woman to receive an athletic scholarship at Vanderbilt, coming straight out of Mount Juliet. We also have Miss Gail Williams on. We're so happy that you're able to join us, Gail. You know, you are the consummate supporter, and we certainly appreciate you. We also have another history maker here. We have Brenda Wynn, who is the Davidson County County Clerk. So we're happy to have her. And we also have Chancellor Pat Moscow with us as well. So, and I'm sure we'll have many more people join us that represent Vanderbilt and represent UT, and are really excited to hear this as well. So let me kick it off. So a few years ago, NCAA held a conference here, and I had the privilege of working in their career fair, working with some students who were working on their interview skills and their resumes. And what I was most impressed with is that most of those students weren't haphazardly approaching a career in athletics. They were very intentionally approaching a career in athletics. And so as two incredible history makers and women who have broken the glass ceiling as athletic directors of major SEC institutions, what was the path for you to get here, and what specifically did you do to be able to land these types of roles?
Well, as the elder of the two, I will start, but I'd first like to say, I think this is a great night to celebrate Candice. I am so excited about her position. I'm so excited about what she has done and what she will do. And just a couple of facts that show you how important her appointment was and how much progress women have made in college athletics. Quick fact, did you know that Yale and Harvard have female athletic directors? We also have two African-American athletic directors, one at Vanderbilt, and we all know her well, and Carla Williams, who is at the University of Virginia. That is a huge mark in what has happened when I was 12, how I got here, I tried out for Little League Baseball and they wouldn't let me play. And it made me mad. And I knew I wanted to be in a business that helped women learn to compete. I knew I had to get an undergraduate. I knew I had to get a master's. If I had life to do all over, I would have gotten an MBA and a law degree. But at that time, there were no role models for women. There was no, I hate to say this on live TV here, is I'm an LSU graduate, but my blood is orange, and I always pull for Tennessee first, LSU second, and Vanderbilt third in the SEC because of being a state school. But there was no women's sports at LSU. So I went out as a coach, and then I became an athletic director. And fortunately, the University of Tennessee, in my opinion, did so much to support me and the role of women in athletics. Candice, tell us some of the things that helped you. I watched you climb to this position, but tell us a little bit about your journey.
Well, first, Joan, I want to thank you for your comments and thank everybody. I'm really excited to be here. Feel very privileged. So I would say two things that I think are important to note in terms of my journey. So one, Joan talked about not having role models, but I was fortunate that I did, because Joan was a role model for me. So when I think about, I think my first SEC meeting was in 2003. And I went into that room with some amazing women who, this was the meeting, the setting for the meeting was senior woman administrators. And the athletic directors would meet in a different room. And so Joan was always in the athletic director's room. And then when there was a break, she would come into the SWA room. And for me, I mean, I've watched Joan for a long time. I mean, I thought it was tremendous, at 20, whatever years old I was at that time, to see Joan, and she would come into the SWA room and she would it sort of gave us credibility to have her in there, but she was only in there just to provide some input because she was an athletics director. So there were other meetings going on. And I mean, from the very beginning, I saw her, I saw Bev Lewis from Arkansas. I knew you could become an athletics director as a woman. And so I appreciate that, Joan. I've always been grateful to you for the example that you've set and the great work that you've done. And then for me, I mean, if you know my story, you know that David Williams is a really important part of, I think, just very much responsible for me having the opportunity that I have right now. And he was a champion for me. I learned early on that we know that you don't get to these positions by yourself, but he saw things in me that I didn't even know were there. And he pushed me constantly to get out of my comfort zone, and he put me in positions so that when it came time to have the opportunity, I felt like I could compete for it. And so for me, my story, I thank you, Joan, and I thank David Williams. And I know that Gail is on here, and I'm not just saying it because Gail's on here, but David and Gail were a package deal. So they embraced me and they set a great example for me, and I know that I owe them a lot.
I'd like to say to Gail, David was an inspiration to me also, because he was such a leader and so thoughtful and thorough in everything he did. Speaking of education, Candice, tell the folks a little bit about not only how you prepared with mentors and watching, but you did a great job in getting the right education to be able to sit in that role.
Candice, before you answer that, let me remind everyone that if you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat, and we'll try to get your questions answered during tonight's program. Okay.
Well, I wish I could have said I did this on purpose, but I think it worked out very well to support my preparation for the role. So I got a bachelor's degree at Vanderbilt in human and organizational development, which was very much about leadership and group dynamics and, effectively working on a team. And we know in athletics, we do that every day. I got a master's degree in counseling, which I never did ever practice in terms of being a formal counselor, but you use those skills, those empathetic listening skills and being present. We use that every day with coaches and student athletes. And then I'm fortunate enough to get my doctorate in higher ed administration. And that was about learning how universities work. And I think that was a really important part of this process because, we're we're part of a higher education institution, and I think athletics plays a tremendous role in advancing university mission. So I think every day I'm able to pull those together, but just trying to be very thoughtful about using what you learn. So that has benefited me. I'm very thankful.
And you've used it well. When Candice is one of those, when she spoke, we listened, and we appreciated that because we always knew it wasn't just off the top of her head. It was well thought of. Some of you might wonder really what an athletic director does. I still, after 40 years, wonder what an athletic director does. But I always thought, and I don't know about you, Candice, I thought of my job was to represent the university and obviously be sure we were in the NCAA guidelines, but day in and day out, I thought one of my job is helping the coaches be the best that they could be, where the student athletes could have the best experience they could have. How do you feel about that?
I agree with that 100%. I agree with that. I agree with that.
You know, Candice, when I came in, there was a lot of trials. There wasn't much in women's athletics. We played. I actually coached at Tennessee, and the most important people in the audience was the president of the university and my husband, and I think there were about 5 others, and that was all. So when I came back as athletic director, one of the things I wanted to do, Pat Summitt was already there. I get credit for hiring her. I didn't hire her, but I kept her, and that was my game. So we had the opportunity to work together for over 3 decades. But I wanted to sell our program. These young ladies had come up playing sports, and I thought it was important that people understood that women could compete. And what a lot of you might not know, the first major competition in women's basketball nationwide was the Tennessee Vanderbilt game. I was actually up in New York before we all got locked in here, and I went to a play. I went to see To Kill a Mockingbird, and this gentleman sat down in front of me, and I thought, oh, I know him. And it was Willie Geist, who was a Vanderbilt graduate. And I thought, well, I'm going to be cool. I'm not going to get involved. Well, that lasted to intermission. And I tapped him on the shoulder, and I said, I am a huge fan of yours. I tape your program every Sunday morning. And I told him who I was, and he got this huge grin, and he said, Joan, I was at Tennessee when Vanderbilt and Tennessee were battling each other, and he went through and we talked about games and those kind of things. So I really credit Tennessee and Vanderbilt for putting women's basketball. I did say one time when you sold it out that y'all didn't know how to count because you gave away too many tickets. And when I finally got into the gym, I remember my husband or President Johnson was not in the gym. So I went to your ushers and I said, you can't take care of all the fans out there, but you got to take care of 2 people, which again brings you what an athletic director does, is sell your program. And one of my favorite sayings is, it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And I think what we've been able to do with the Vanderbilt Tennessee women's programs especially is let people know that women's athletics is important.
Absolutely.
What do you remember about those times, Candice?
Well, I remember in high school watching Tennessee women's basketball, and that was like the premier program. That was the pinnacle. And I didn't get recruited by Tennessee, but to have the chance to come to Vanderbilt and to play against Pat Summitt. I mean, we didn't win very much against Pat Summitt, that, but what an amazing opportunity. It was amazing. And I think, I thought about you earlier this week, Joan, when I saw on social media that it was Pat Summitt's 68th birthday.
Yes.
And I just think about just the doors that she opened. I know we're sort of playful rivals, but I have a tremendous amount of respect. And I think that you're right that I think that Vanderbilt has benefited from what Tennessee has done in terms of shining a spotlight on women's athletics, but certainly you all set the bar very high.
Well, it was really, really fun. And you talk about you didn't win very much. I have to admit, I think it was my first Vanderbilt game as athletic director. I made the mistake of sitting next to Mr. Head, Pat's dad. And I immediately found out why Pat was so competitive. And we went on to lose that game. And I can remember going to the cheerleaders and telling them to go get a snack, because we probably would not stop on the way home, and to go to the back of the bus and be very quiet, because it was going to be very intense on the way home. And sure enough, it was. And we went home and practiced that night. We didn't go home. And then I can remember, as we left practice, to show what Candice has preached and what we have preached is their students first and athletes second. So here it was at 2 a.m. or something like that. And the last thing Pat said at the end of practice, be at your 8 o'clock class. And so those are the things that we got to remember. So it was great competition.
Right.
What's your first big challenge?
I mean, the most immediate one is getting back from COVID and trying to safely resume our sport programs. So I certainly would not have thought that would be the first thing, on my plate, but that's
Is your football team back yet?
Yes, they are. So they've started voluntary workouts, and the SEC allowed us to come back starting on June 8th to resume voluntary workouts, and, just hoping to ramp up and actually start the fall season as planned.
Ours is back also, and our men's and women's basketball team just got back. And for our audience, we live in a world of trying to take care of athletes, but the world is looking at us to say, what next? And I think it's real important. I've often said that athletics is not the most important thing at a university,
right?
But it is the front porch. It's the most visible. And I always felt as an athletic director that it was our job to keep the porch strong and clean and appealing, where people would want to come in and go to the chemistry lab in the law school and those type of things. And when we think about, because it's, right now, it's the only word I can describe is just surreal. None of us have lived this. The best email I got was the other day. It said, breaking news. In case you didn't know, today is Wednesday. And that's kind of the way I have felt all along this. But, when I was actually in Nashville, when the virus really hit, I was actually at a alumni reception in Nashville before the SEC men's basketball game was starting, and my phone went tweak, and it said, there will be no fans at the game tomorrow. And then a little later, my phone went tweak and said, there are no games. So I think athletics was the first visible thing that people said, something's bad's coming. Lolita, we got any questions?
Yeah, so we do. So we have some questions. And so we have 2 questions, and I'm going to put these 2 together because I think they kind of go together. So the question is, so what is it like to be the only woman in the room when all the ADs get together? And how are you helping other women who have interest in becoming an AD realizing their dreams?
Okay, Candice, have you had a face-to-face meeting yet with all the ADs?
When I was in the interim role, when we were at SEC meetings in conjunction with the men's
so that was your
basketball
first time to be
that
in
was
the
my
room.
first one.
And so Candice is the only woman in the room right now, which is exciting. Tell us how it felt.
In some ways, it felt very comfortable and familiar, because those were faces that, I'd seen before and been in meetings before. And I would say they've been very, very supportive. It's funny, like they'll be talking and they'll say, so guys, and then they'll stop and they'll say, oh, guys and gal. And everybody will kind of tense up and, but I would say, all jokes aside, it's been good. It's been good. I feel like we've got good rapport, and I think just, you benefit from having been in those meetings over time. So that's been good. That's been good.
When I think about being the only woman in the room when we first started, I think about when we were negotiating the SEC contract with television. And what happens is you sit, everybody's in the room, and everybody comes in and presents their proposal. So ESPN comes in, Fox comes in, CBS. And it was so funny because every time they would come in and I was going to say exactly the same words, they would say, "You guys and Joan." And finally, after the second one, I said, it doesn't bother me if you say "you guys." I can be included in that. But they were all trying so hard to be inclusive. And one of the things that, I imagine most of the folks on this call, because of who you are, have been the only woman in the room. And I loved "Lean In" by Sheryl Sandberg, and because I thought what she said was to lean in. And I always wanted to be more prepared than anybody in the room. So I think that's the way I kind of faced that. And when you asked the second part of your question, I'll start and then Candice follow up, was how are we continuing to mentor people? Well, as emeritus means you're old, it means you don't have to make major decisions anymore and you can smile more. But I always want to give back because I think that's important. So I have kind of Wednesday mentoring meetings, and I have 5 or 6 young ladies across the country who want to be athletic directors. And so they call in on Wednesday, and we don't do it every Wednesday, but at least twice a month. And we talk about the times and what's happening in their life and advice. So that's kind of the way I get to keep my fingers in the pot.
Oh, that's great.
Kids.
So I just try to make myself available to, one of the things that maybe this shouldn't have surprised me, but I was really blown away by the number of women that I heard from after my appointment. And many of them I didn't know, but they were very appreciative of just having, the role model. Like I talked about Joan being a role model for me. And so I think you start to think about just the responsibility that you have. And then, the reality is that, there's the layer of being a woman, and then there's being a Black woman in this role. And, for many years I sat in those rooms, and, David Williams was the first Black athletics director in the SEC. And there have been 5, if you include me. 3 of them have been from Vanderbilt. So that just shows you, there's still some more work to be done, right? And so you sit in that room with both of those lenses on, and I just know, I know we all want to do a good job in our roles, but you feel like you sort of have the weight of other people's opportunities on you too. And I do know, I feel very fortunate, of course, to be in the role, but I'm also aware that there are some really just highly competent, highly deserving, highly prepared folks out there that just haven't been given opportunities. And so I'm really, really cognizant of that. And just in every turn, I just try to make myself available, in particular to women who aspire to be an athletic director.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah. So what things surprised you most when you became AD? And of course, this question was coming. What is the most interesting recruiting experience that you had?
Candice, start that one.
Well, I guess what surprised me, this may be silly, but I did not expect that just by virtue of being in the role, people would hold you accountable for decisions made over the last 50 years. I didn't expect that. That was interesting to me. I understand, you're responsible for all of it, but there were people talking about things from decades ago, and they're mad about it, and they want to know what you're going to do about it. And that surprised me. That surprised me a bit. But I at the end of the day, I'm happy that they're passionate. That's a good thing because we have something to work with. But that did catch me off guard.
Yeah, I think the passion. Not everybody thinks they can be a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher or a bookstore owner or a politician, but everybody thinks they can be a coach and an AD.
That's right.
And everybody has an opinion, and we have to learn to listen. In fact, I said the other day, if I'd had $1 for every time I've been asked the last 2 months, Joan, are we going to play football? And nobody knows. I think the best answer I've heard to that question was from Mitch Barnhart, who's the AD up in Kentucky and one of my favorite people. He said, you know, when this first happened, everybody had a race to the microphone. Everybody wanted to say something, but we had nothing to say because still we all are saying, yes, we want to play. Yes, we're planning to play, but none of us know the final answer yet.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
as far as,
sorry.
recruiting, probably one of the most interesting recruiting stories was obviously when Pat was pregnant and went up. She walked in my office and she's like 8.5 months pregnant, and recruiting was the most important thing in the world. And she says, I've got to go to see Michelle Marciniak in Pennsylvania. And I said, Pat, you can't go. Yes, I can. The doctor said I could go. So I was able to get her a private plane to fly up where she didn't have to fly commercial. And when she actually went into labor in Michelle's house, she told the pilots that she would not have that baby in Pennsylvania, and she was in big time labor over Virginia, and Virginia had beaten us the last year in basketball to knock us out of the Final Four. So she wouldn't land in Virginia, and she wanted the baby born in Knoxville. So she made it back, but that was a pretty intense time. And the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would say, and some of you are old enough to remember Paul Harvey, the rest of the story is Michelle didn't come to Tennessee her first year. She went to Notre Dame, and we had to wait another year to get her. So you never know in recruiting. The best part about our jobs is we get to work with 18 to 22-year-olds. The worst part about our jobs is we get to work with 18 to 22-year-olds.
No doubt about it. I've heard that story several times. I love that story. I don't have one to top that. I don't have one to top that, but recruiting is very, very interesting.
And it's especially interesting right now. And the one thing that every coach I've talked to during this 3 months of being quarantined, the first answer they give me when I say, how's it going, is I miss my players. I miss my kids. And of course, that's what you want as an athletic director. You want a coach who cares about the kids. But I haven't been working with them hands-on in recruiting. Candice, you have. Tell us some of the ways they're recruiting.
Well, you know, Zoom has been a powerful tool. So it's been good to watch our coaches get very innovative about, you know, how to virtually do junior days and official visits and campus tours. And so that's been really interesting. But I laughed because we had a coaches meeting yesterday, and Jerry Stackhouse thinks Zoom is the greatest thing ever. Like he's like, I mean, this is great. I mean, I have done so much with Zoom. So we kind of laughed because they figured it out, you know, They figured it out. You still got to get players. So it's been good. It's been very creative.
I'm right there with Jerry. I gave a speech the other day, and I didn't even have to get on an airplane or get in the car. It was pretty good.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
When that next time I have a meeting downtown Knoxville, I'm going to say, let's just Zoom it.
Let's just Zoom. That's right.
So we have a couple questions related to COVID, naturally. So what are your thoughts for preparing for athletic events post-COVID, and what type of precautions are you taking?
You know, I'd say first to piggyback on what Joan was saying when she referenced Mitch Barnhart. You know, this is one of the most challenging parts of this is that there are just so many questions and not enough answers. You know, we just don't know. Each week you feel like you learn a little bit more, and so we're doing a lot of models. Don't exactly know which one we're going to employ, but you know, just to start with bringing our student athletes back for summer workouts, you know, we had to implement a COVID testing protocol. We had to increase like the sanitation and the disinfecting that's happening around the building and all the high touch spaces. We're doing daily symptom monitoring. We're keeping groups of athletes. We're keeping athletes in small groups. So, you know, the idea behind that is obviously social distancing is important, but you try to keep these same scripted groups because if you have a positive test, then when you start to do the tracing, you hope you can limit it to at least that small group of student athletes that they've been around. So, that extends to roommates, to how they eat. I mean, this little pack of kids sort of walking around together.
New best friends.
New best friends. That's right. That's right. I think that we're going to watch team dynamics really blossom because of just the way we have to do things. But how that extends to actually having actual games in the fall, that's a more daunting task as we think about how you're going to social distance in the stands, if you actually can have fans in the stands. Much of that will be based on local public health guidance. I think that's one of the things that's kind of feels odd for all of us, because you've got the SEC rules, the NCAA rules, you've got what your university is doing, you've got what your city's doing. I mean, and it could be different, right, depending on which institution you're talking about. And so there are a lot of questions, but we just keep talking as a staff about, we have to make sure that the health and safety stays first. So we talk about being flexible. We really have to be flexible now. We actually have to practice what we preach. So it's not going to be easy. I think we're doing everything we can to prepare, but it anywhere from, when you think about the football game and, you bring donors down to the field before the game, and you have recruits down there, and you have the band and the cheerleaders, I don't know that we're going to be able to we can't have, that same number of people. We're not going to be able to travel the same number of people. I mean, it's going to be really interesting. And so right now, like I said, lots more questions than answers, but we have a lot of work to do in the next 2 months.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think anybody knows what's going to do it. In the leadership programs I've been giving here in the last month or so, and this applies to any leader, is I think in a time of crisis, a leader has to stay calm and has to communicate more. And I think that's real important. And I think the conference has done a great job of doing that. And watching our athletic directors, I think that's been an important skill.
Agree with that.
Great. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn on cameras.
Oh, good. We get to see them.
Good.
Well, and while we're doing that, and people can raise their hand if they have a question, they can talk directly, because there are a lot of fans. Y'all are so popular. People love y'all. That's great. Because I love y'all too. Y'all are remarkable.
We hadn't lost the game this year.
That's right. Undefeated right now.
So, but as we do that, question for you, Candice. What are your measures of success as you fill this new role? So have you thought about what your vision and your success markers?
Yeah, no, great question. My biggest focus is on creating the best student athlete experience possible. And I know there's a number of ways that we can measure that. That extends more. It certainly includes what's happening in the respective sport, wins and losses. Wins make for a better experience. We all know that, but you want it to be holistic. You want these young people to feel prepared and equipped to take the next step. My short-term thought is around stakeholder engagement. So particularly alumni. I think that that's an area where we've got to do a better job. And certainly that's near and dear to my heart as an alum. That's really important to me. I think we also, we've got this mantra we have it on the walls and on billboards, where we talk about the city, the degree, and the SEC. Well, I think that's a great value proposition, but we've got some work to do to make sure that we're fulfilling that. So, I know we all know that Vanderbilt has an incredible academic experience. We know that, right? We play in the best conference in the country, and we're in an city that is growing by leaps and bounds. Well, we need to do a good job of integrating those three things. And so that short term, that's really my focus. And there are ancillary things that you take off of that, like for student athlete experience, you have to have the facilities that support that, and you have to make sure the resources are there. So, in some ways a heavy lift, but I'm really excited about the opportunity, because it's not, the cupboard's not bare. We've got some really great bones. We've done some really good things. And so now it's just about trying to have sustainable success across our entire portfolio. So that's my short and long-term focus, really.
Great.
Okay, Lolita, not to interrupt, but let me just real quick. If anybody wants to ask a question, please raise your hand and I'll unmute you because I think I have to do it from my end. I'll go ahead and kick off a question to say, given, let's say that we only have limited amount of fans in a stadium, in a arena or whatever, fan enthusiasm is a great part of success of a team. How do you think your teams will handle if it's no fans or a very limited amount of fans? How do you think that'll affect their ability to play, etc.?
I think it won't be near as much fun, but we're all pretty competitive. Once you toss the coin and kick the ball or shoot the first basket, they will enjoy the game. But we're all hoping that we're able to get fans in the stand.
Candice?
I agree with that. You know, I think Joan talked earlier about when she was talking to coaches who said they miss their kids. And I think everybody's hungry to get back. You know, I think if given a choice to not play at all or play in front of no fans or limited fans, you know, when you look at those two choices, our kids, you know, they want to compete. So if they have to do it in front of virtual fans or limited fans, you know, they will, but hopefully it won't come to that.
Okay, Brenda Wynn, you always have a question.
Oh,
I'm unmuting you. Unmute yourself, Brenda.
Well, I thought this was a cocktail hour.
It is.
I want to raise a toast.
It is. Yes.
okay.
I want to raise a toast to Candice, to Joan, and to my good friend David Williams to say, here, here.
Cheers.
Guys,
Cheers.
here, here.
Thank you.
And Brenda, Joyce, and Candice, and Joan, I want to recognize Monica Falk Knotson, who is executive of the Sports Authority. So,
Yay. Hey, Monica.
thank you.
Okay, who else has a question? Monica, you'll have to unmute yourself. Okay, Morgan, I'm unmuting you. You may have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi, I'm Morgan. Joan and I have met a few times. I
Yes.
just a couple questions. Well, not a couple questions. It's more of a broad range question. But what tips would you have for someone who is a international Team USA disabled wheelchair basketball player who wants to, I guess, break down barriers in the NCAA? I mean, I played 6 years of college basketball, but we weren't included in NCAA, and I want to get more of a, I guess, more of a director's role, but combining that with able athletics. I know kind of a tough question, but do you see inclusion happening within, I guess, Vanderbilt? I know Tennessee is trying with something, but what tips would you have for someone who was a disabled, professional athlete, trying to break these barriers as a woman and as a disabled athlete in a university athletic setting?
I had an opportunity to help with us getting some groundwork, and my advice was work with all the parties, work with the university, work with the athletic department, work with the city, and it's going to take a lot of folks to get together to make that happen. But I don't know of anybody that's not supportive.
I think that's a great question, and I don't really have an answer for you at this time. But I just made a note when you were talking, because I do think that I agree with what Joan is saying, that I can't imagine that anybody would not be supportive. And so it's like anything else, right? You got to get the right people in the room and who are committed. But I applaud you, and I appreciate the question, and I'll do a little homework.
Thank you, Monica.
Yeah.
So,
A question. Kathy sent me a question earlier. I didn't get to.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll say, okay, so this is for Candice. Candice, I am extremely proud of you and excited about your future. I just would like to hear your thoughts around, Vanderbilt has always had an academic focus, and it still does. So trying to figure out how to grow the athletic, I guess the support. What ideas do you have going forward in terms of growing focus around athletics? And I know David worked really diligently to build some kind of consensus between the two, but how do you see that and what are your thoughts?
So I think great question, Kathy. I think that you're right. So I do think that the groundwork has been laid because David worked very hard with that. And David was also in a unique position, like the athletic director, former general counsel, a tenured professor. I mean, he had these lenses and he could cross these lines. And there's really, there's really nobody else that's like that. But to be able to have watched him do that, I understand the importance. And I know that we're going to have cross sections to be able to get the support that we need. The good part, like from my perspective, in being even during the interim time for me in the 3 months, whatever, when Susan Wente talked to me about how the university, so Susan Wente, our interim provost and chancellor, talked to me about the way the university saw athletics, I think I actually understood all of the groundwork that had been laid. Like to me, it was starting to pay off. And then I think if you fast forward to our new chancellor, who will start on July 1st. So he and I have had a few meetings, and he said, listen, it's a new day. We know who we are from an academic standpoint. We as an institution can't be afraid to say athletics can help us fulfill our mission. Back to the front porch comment that Joan had. Like, I think we finally have folks in Kirkland, important in those higher up positions, that recognize that athletics can be used for the benefit of all of us. I know David fought very hard for that. I think we're finally seeing that come to fruition in terms of the support. And I think you have to have support from the top to be able to do that, right? So we're all sort of speaking with the same message. That was really important to me, even in an interim capacity. And so, I expect that we're going to take that and move with that. And I think, Kathy, that gets to your question, right? It is going to take everybody, but
Absolutely.
We got to change the narrative. We got to change the narrative, and it's going to take the administration to do it. But I do feel confident about that from what I've seen in this short time.
Good, thanks. Great.
Montrell, you have a question?
Yes, getting back to Vanderbilt athletics, how do you get back to getting a toehold on not losing athletes?
I didn't hear the last part of the question.
I said typically Vanderbilt has lost a lot of in-home athletes in Nashville to other communities. How do you start back picking up momentum to keep athletes at home?
And it's a great question. We've got a lot of local talent that I do think that we've missed out on in the past. I think that, we're starting to see a little bit of work there, like women's basketball's gotten a couple local commitments. And I think the other thing is you got to get the local commitments. They need to have a great experience. And then, so even with the local ones that we've had before, if they didn't have a great experience or it wasn't sort of what they wanted, then sometimes that can hurt your recruiting efforts. I do think that the coaches that we have understand the importance of that. And we know, like at Vanderbilt, our pool is already a little smaller to start because of that. We have to have elite students and elite athletes. But I do think this has sort of been a long time coming. We have a group of coaches that understand that is not a handicap. That's actually a benefit for us. Like, we buy into what we can be at Vanderbilt and the unique way that we do it. And I think that that's really important, right? Because you got to have coaches who fit that and understand, and then go find kids that match that. So it's something that we talk a lot about. So I think it's a fair question, and I'll keep hammering that home with our coaches because I think it's important.
Okay, I have a question. Warwick, we're going to go buy him a computer with a video because clearly his computer doesn't have one. So then he texted me a question, and here I'm going to read it verbatim. It appears that certain states have already passed legislation allowing athletes to receive compensation for their image and likeness. For Joan, what would Pat say about student athletes being paid? Candice, how do the schools in our state address, quote, pay for image and likeness, unquote, for recruits visiting Florida and California schools? Joan, I'll let you go first.
Okay. First of all, I probably won't repeat what Pat would say right now, but I think there is still a lot of conversation that needs to happen before this goes in. And I think we have to come up with a rule that's for everybody. It can't be California one thing, another. And there's got to be some, what I call guardrails, because if we go and pass the law the way we're talking about now, there's no way we're going to be able to control recruiting. And that's the biggest concern. I think all of us want as much as we can for our athletes to be able to do the things that they need to do. Mm-hmm. But it's a whole different world. And I go back to we're amateur sports. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important.
I agree with that.
And it's a good time to be athletic director emeritus for it.
I agree with what Joan said. I agree with that. We still have a lot of work to do, but times are changing, and we're going to have to sort of adjust with them, but with the guardrails that Joan spoke of, I agree with that.
So how do you handle it when you're doing recruiting from the other state? When he says recruits from visiting Florida and California?
Well, none of those laws are in place right now. So right. What they're trying to do is hold it off until committees can come back with the guardrails and what would work for all of us.
Okay, so
I hope they'll let athletics do the guardrails.
Right.
And I hate to say this to a political group, but it doesn't need to be the politicians deciding what the guardrails need to be.
I totally understand. Okay, Sarah Lee, did you raise your hand? Hang on, unmute yourself. You're still muted.
Some people would like to keep that.
I know, I was going to say, Larry, behind you.
Right here. Thank you for all the good memories. Back in the day when Candice was playing and the gym was always sold out, it was my job to get tickets for all of the Vanderbilt and Lady Vols fans in my family, and I was having a lot of trouble not getting them in the nosebleed section. So I called my classmate, Chancellor David Williams, and he said, how many tickets do you need? And I said, 15, and he got me great seats. So thank you. So many great memories there, and I hope we see Memorial packed again. I would love to go and see that. That was great. So thank you for the memories. And I wanted to ask Candice and Joan, what have you read lately, fiction, nonfiction, that you really enjoyed? Any good books to recommend?
Joan?
Candice, you want to start?
Sure.
You've had plenty of spare time.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to do a ton of reading, but I do love to read. David actually got me hooked on these books by Greg Iles. They're set in Natchez, Mississippi, and yes. Natchez Burning and the Bone Tree, and I mean those. So he got me hooked on the trilogy, but then I went back and read all of his other books, and I mean I highly recommend them. Especially they're mostly set in Natchez, Mississippi, and there's always like a social justice or a racial component, and just really, really good. And
he's a great author.
He's so good. I like him very much. And then I recently, like 5 months ago, read a book called Emotional Agility. I loved it. It was amazing. It talks about, being free to experience what your emotions are, but your decisions need to be based on your values. And it's really good. And I haven't read a ton of self-help. I read more fiction, but I really, really like that. And so that's kind of top of mind for me.
Good. Well, I listened to your book report on American Dirt, and I had just read that, and I thought that was a page burner. In fact, I have to admit, I'm a big Audible person because I travel a lot and drive a lot. So I did get stopped for speeding one time going back to Charleston, and I tried to explain to the policeman that I was listening to John Grisham's The Chamber and trying to keep Sam out of the gas chamber. and he started laughing, and I didn't get a ticket, so it was okay. But I read that, and I just read The Giver of Stars, which I thought was really good. And I try to be reading one book that I call fun and another book that's good for me. And I'm sitting right here looking at a book by David Moon, who's a local financial advisor here in Knoxville, and it's Thoughts or Things, and it's a kind of a thing to help with your children and to tell them different things. And I always didn't ask my children when they came home from school, or my grandchildren, what they learned. I always ask them, what good questions did you ask? My bright grandchild told me this year, I asked, could I go to the bathroom? So so that didn't quite work with him, but love to read. Great questions.
I love The Giver of Stars. Laura Smith, who's logged on to this by phone, loaned me her copy recently, and it was a fabulous book. Hey, Kathy Morgan, are I noticed you had put a question or a comment down at the bottom. Did you have a question? But you're muted. You'll need to unmute. Because Kathy was a athletic trainer for the Big 8 years ago.
No, I didn't really have a question, but I was one of the first women student trainers, and working football and going to places like visiting the University of Oklahoma, which they were not as enlightened as we were. It's really awesome just to see how far you guys have come. It's great.
Thank you.
Did Gail have a question? Were you waving? Gail?
I was waving.
Yeah.
I don't really have a question, but I have a couple comments. Joan, thank you so much for those beautiful comments that you said about Dave. And he was indeed a fan of yours. And I can imagine how many times he told Candice, go talk to Joan. She'll help you understand that issue a whole lot better. I can imagine that he told her that on multiple occasions. And so I appreciate so much.
Thank you.
That you're here and that you are still supporting Candice in so many wonderful ways. And Candice, thank you for just being Candice. You know I love you, right? And so we had the wonderful opportunity in January to accept the Pat Summitt Award on David's behalf from the NCAA. And as I think about it, and I hear you all talk about Pat, and I hear you talk about strong women in college athletics, I know David would have been honored to receive the award, but he would have been even more honored to know that he received it in honor of one of his heroes. And so David believed in strong women, and he knew the role that women needed to play in college athletics. And so I think if he were watching this tonight, he would be so exceptionally proud of both of you in so many ways, as I am very proud of both of you. And, you know, I watched Candice when she first started playing, coming from Huntsville, Alabama, and my kids were little. They go, oh, no, Candice is in the game. And they were always so thrilled and excited. And to watch her lead in the way that she is leading right now is extraordinary. It's extraordinary for my children to watch her. It's extraordinary for so many other children who just sort of were raised by Candice Story Lee in this space. And I love that she says thank you to people like you, Joan, because she knows that it just didn't happen because of her. And to watch that humility and that grace is so incredible to me. And so what I say to all of us on this phone is that they are sort of by themselves in terms of women leaders, but we have to make certain that we hold them, that we lift them, that we support them in the work that they do. And they know that we are here. So when the day does get hard, that they know that there's spaces for them to land. And so we have to make a commitment as women and as leaders and males as allies to sort of say, we are here for them, and we are here to support them for them to reach the pinnacle of success that they are beyond capable of. And we just have to stand in with them and be here and be there because y'all rock. Oh, such incredible women. And I hold both of you in great awe, and thanks for just doing this today. It's just, I just feel just inspired by both of you.
Gail, thank you. And that's so well stated. I can remember one of David's hires. I called him immediately and I said, that was not just a home run. That was a grand slam home run. So we had that kind of communication. And that's what, if you had other SEC administrators in this, on this call, they would all be male, but they would also feel the same way Candice and I feel. It's such a great family. You know, our fans are so competitive, and that's what makes it exciting. But as administrators, we really pull for each other, and I think that's important. In fact, I will take a little credit for some of Vanderbilt's success, because I've watched your baseball, and I'm a Tim Corbin fan, and many of you might not know that I coached Maggie, Tim's wife.
Oh, did you really?
She played tennis for
Awesome.
me at the College of Charleston. In fact, when y'all were at the World Series, I called the Kim on the sideline reporter and said, "You keep talking about Maggie as the mother and the wife of Tim. You need to talk about her as a college athlete." She came in second in the country. Our team came in second in the country 3 years in a row. So she's quite an asset too. So I'm gonna take a little credit for y'all's baseball program.
There you go. We'll take it. We'll take whatever we can, right, Candice?
That's right.
Anchor down.
That's right. That's great.
Okay,
Hey, Joyce has been really quiet, and before she takes over, I'm gonna tell you all this. Somebody said, "Well, why are you doing that tonight?" And I said, "Because Joyce calls, and when Joyce calls, I answer." So Joyce, thank you.
Oh, thank you. And I'm going to ask one question, and Lolita's going to wrap up. Actually, I must make a statement and ask a question that Warwick sent in. Gail, to you, we all admired David, thought he was great, but I want to say to you, I admire you for what you've done. I will go back to what my friend Lois DeBerry used to say. We as women have to reach back and pull forward, and you did that. And we need to continue doing that. So I want to say thank you to you as well for what you've done, and where we go from here. So Candice, Warwick is always talking about athletes. Is there a plan in place for other fall sports other than football?
Yes, so the NCAA and the SEC have allowed us to bring back all sports. We're being very conservative at Vanderbilt, taking a very rigid, phased approach just to ensure that our protocols are what we need them to be. But after 4th of July, we'll be bringing in men's and women's basketball and women's soccer. Cross country will come in August, and then the rest of our sports will come when school begins in the fall. So,
and we have volleyball, and so we'd add volleyball to soccer that we'll bring in. Yeah.
Correct.
Lolita, it's all yours.
All right. So this has been a really fun discussion, and I want to thank everyone for taking time out to be here. I want to thank you again, Joan. Joan Emeritus does not mean old; it means wise.
Wise.
Oh, I like that. I like that.
And we're so glad you're here and that you are still imparting your wisdom on many other women to help them also achieve the success they desire in athletics and beyond. Candice, I mean, girl, we are how
rocks.
Happy. Like, I mean, we are so happy for you and so excited for the things that you're going to do. And please know you have our support. You have a community here that wants to see you succeed and will do anything that we can to help you be successful in your role. So don't be shy about calling opponents. Like I wasn't shy to call you and ask you to do this. So, please ask us anytime. And so thank you all. And thank you, Joyce, who is executive director for the Women's Political Collaborative of Tennessee, for pulling all this together. She makes it look effortless, but she is an incredible executive director. She does it all the time. And I am so grateful for you. And again, if you're not a member, please consider becoming a member of WPCTN. These are the type of programs we do, and we'd love to have you. Thank you all. Have a good night and salute.
Thank you. Happy cocktail.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.